But these guys are doing something really unique, really artistic, and clearly with a very close group of friends and colleagues and creators. And that's the dream. Well, hello, and welcome back to Gateway to Anime. How are you all? What's going on? We are the podcast where we deep dive into the classics as well as bring you the best new anime. Ever wanted to get into anime but didn't know where to start? We are the podcast for you. I am your host, Sam. Charlie, how are you?
I'm good. Excited to be back this week. I was away last week. Sorry for all of those who dearly missed me, but now I've returned to talk about our cool studio, and I'm excited to chat, and I'm back. Stoked to be home. Not really, but here we are.
Yes. Well, Graham, how are you?
I'm back on the edge of the table, guys.
He's back to where he
I was in the
belongs.
middle. It was weird.
It was weird. Did you
Weird.
feel powerful?
I felt trapped. I'm a bigger man than you, and I was just like between two microphones going, that's an interesting point. Oh, yeah. No, everything's back to where it was. Everything is all good.
As it should be.
Yes, indeed. So obviously, Charlie, you have been in Japan.
It's true.
You had a good time?
The rumors are true. I did enjoy myself in Japan. It is, in fact, a great place to visit. Who would have thought? No, it's obviously a great time. Not my first time in Japan. Won't be my last. Highly recommend. Got lots of fun weeb recommendations. Got a cool couple of shirts. Bought some things and just had an all-round great time. But one thing I kept on hearing every time I was out and about was a particular show this season and its very popular theme song, which is going to, just segue our way into the episode here. But I kept on hearing Dandadan or Otonoke by Creepy Nuts everywhere. And I went, God, this is a good theme from what has been so far an incredible show. So let's talk about it.
Well, yes. So obviously, as I mentioned at the tagline, bringing you the best new anime. Well, the best new anime right now is quite clearly Dandadan. It is extraordinary. Graham, you've been a big fan of it for a long time. You've been talking about it as a manga reader for quite some time. How's the adaptation been for you?
It's been great. It's relief more than anything else. Similar to like Kaiju number 8. I was like, please don't suck, please don't suck, please don't suck. And it didn't suck. And it's been a blast. The theme tune is icing on a very well-made cake.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Yeah. What more can I say?
It is extraordinary. So we wanted to talk about why Dandadan is such an incredible adaptation. Obviously, it's a great story. Obviously, it's a great artwork. And we'll talk more about that, about the author and how he came to make the show. We've talked about it before on the podcast. But I wanted to talk about the production company or the animation studio behind this production. And that is a studio called Science Saru. Now, it's very interesting because it was founded by Masaaki Yuasa and longtime collaborator Eon Young Choi, who is actually a South Korean woman, funnily enough. And if something is a theme about Science Saru, a lot of transnational employees, and as part of their sort of mission statement is to be a transnational organization, which is part of the reason why a lot of their work is so interesting. So before I get into that, it actually came to be in 2013 when they were producing the 163rd episode of Adventure Time.
Oh, right.
Yes, the American
How good is that?
cartoon. So it was an episode entitled Food Chain, and Cartoon Network requested a studio to credit the episode. And so out of necessity, Science Saru was born, but it was basically Masaaki Yuasa and Young Choi, and a couple of others basically made the episode themselves in their house. That's how it all began.
Cool.
Yeah,
amazing.
It's crazy. So basically, this then became the home for Yuasa and Choi's work, and they've since branched out into other projects and collaborators. So Choi is the current president and CEO, having succeeded Yuasa after he stepped down in March 2020, but I'll get to that in a minute. It utilizes a hybrid animation production method, which combines traditional hand-drawn cell animation and digital animation, including Flash. It uses Flash and Adobe Animate as part of their two major,
Still Flash?
Yeah, still using
Flash
Flash.
is still
yeah,
out
yeah.
there.
It's one of the things that they
Wow.
use. And
Flash
sort
will
of a
never die.
technique not used in Japan before they really started doing it. There was a company that Choi worked for before, which was using a lot of Adobe Animate, and she sort of brought that with her when she came back to work with Yuasa.
Interesting.
So
Should I be also learning Flash now? Is that what I need to put on my resume? You don't have to just do everything. It's like add Flash.
I learned Flash when I was in university in 2013, and by that point it was already out of date. So,
well, this was 2013.
oh yeah, well,
So
there
there
you go.
you go.
Yeah.
But it's
It was one of those things that people were like, yeah, this will be dead soon. HTML5 will kill this, and it's still alive. Like,
it's still going.
it's crazy. It's still out there.
It is crazy. So basically, in May 2024, actually, funnily enough, Toho, obviously a huge company, announced it would buy all of Science Saru's shares and make it a subsidiary. The deal went through in June of this year, 2024, and Toho are actually the largest importer of films in Japan and the creators of Godzilla, that IP. So Science Saru has now been purchased by a huge company, which is, I think, part of the reason why they're now starting to branch out into more larger IPs like Dandadan. But they're still maintaining this kind of indie vibe. But I'll talk more about that. So the name translates to Science Monkey.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's
So
in the
it's
back of my
Science
brain
Monkey.
somewhere.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
Science Monkey. So
correct. So Yuasa actually used to frequently draw himself as a monkey in self-portraits, but he wanted his company to appear smarter, more sophisticated, so he added the science to it, which, makes sense.
Yeah.
His intent was to having a company that sort of possesses both instinct and intelligence, because he still wanted to be a very creative place. And once I go through their history, you'll see how just how creative it actually is. But still, obviously, they want it to be a serious business, which they have, of course, become. Initially, the first production office was based out of a small suburban house converted into the animation studio. By the end of 2013, the company had 5 staff, just 5. And the studio sort of refers to its mix of hand-drawn and digital animation production method as digitally assisted animation. And when utilizing this method, the key animation is actually drawn by hand and then recreated digitally for the stages of the in-between animation, as well as for the coloring. So it utilizes this technique they believe it increases efficiency. And it's quite interesting because obviously we'll talk more about the difference between key animation and in-between animation. It's pretty self-explanatory. But this allows for stronger understanding of the director's vision, because basically it allows projects to be completed faster with a smaller team, because a lot of hand drawing for the key animation, throw it to the digital for the in-betweens, save time, save money, and they can all come together on a much smaller vision because it's a smaller team. That's sort of how Science Saru sort of began. Saru is also unique as it employs, as I said, a multicultural animation staff. According to Choi, who's the CEO, staff are chosen based off ability, regardless of national origin. And the inclusion of global perspective helps create a more well-rounded story perspective. So that's sort of how they're operating. So basically, they started off as a subcontractor. First project was, of course, Adventure Time, as I mentioned before. And that was followed by providing digitally assisted animation production services for Yuasa's Pong The Animation. They weren't the production company, but they assisted with their digital technique, which is why Pong has that unique animation style. It was produced by Tatsunoko Production, who did Psycho Pass Season 2, and actually alongside Gainax did Neon Genesis. It's that company. So they provided production assistance on 2 episodes of Bones Space Dandy as well.
Yeah.
So they started off doing little bits and bobs, you know what I mean? Outside of the Adventure Time thing. But, I mean, let's talk a little bit about Pong The Animation, because Masaaki Yuasa, for those of you who don't know, is one of the hottest directors in Japan right now.
Easily.
If not, well, he's right up there, right? I mean, we'll go through a bit more later about some of his more famous works. Pong was the first time I came across him, and it blew my mind. I was like, what is this? It's so artistic, and it's like stylized anime sort of hasn't been in vogue for a while. But if you remember a show called Yurei Deco that came out a few years back, it was a anime original, also by Science Saru. Wasn't actually, to me, the best show. But
Interesting premise, just
fascinating premise and incredible art style.
a lot to chew. Like,
But I loved how bold it was as an animation style, because it was Science Saru and it was them just being bold and crazy, which is kind of their vibe.
Which is why they're the perfect studio for Dandadan.
Yes.
Because another one that I was reading that they did was like Tokyo Falls, or that
Japan Sinks.
Japan.
Yes. Tokyo
Falls.
Oh!
I mean, is it Japan Sinks sounds like the same thing,
sounds
to be
just as
honest
dumb.
with you.
Yeah.
And that show was like really dumb. It was like super melodramatic and so over the top. And like, matching the freak didn't quite work. It was like too far one way. But this way it's like, this one is a perfect marriage of that. And I think they're the perfect studio to do it because they're not afraid to go balls to the fucking wall, ridiculous colors, stylized. Like it's really great. Yeah.
It is.
I think my first, it was ping pong, but I think
Devilman Crybaby.
Well, yes.
Crybaby was,
That's
they were taking swings on that show.
Well, this is the big one. Something I will certainly mention. But before we get there, so the first major productions were 2 feature films written and directed by Yuasa called Lou Over the Wall and Night is Short, Walk On, Girl.
No, that's an amazing movie.
Great title.
Yeah.
It's a really great movie.
That's good.
Yeah, I didn't know that was them as
That
well.
was him.
Oh,
Yeah,
shit.
that was
That's a
them.
fantastic
That was their
film.
second film.
Holy shit.
Second ever like major thing they did.
Great
Well,
title.
good for them.
Yeah. Which both came out in 2017 and received huge critical acclaim. And yes, I mean, Yuasa's the guy. And Choi as well. More research I did about Choi. She's a badass. Like the stuff she's doing, they're both incredible. So the major turning point for Yuasa was, of course, and Science Saru in general, was what you just mentioned, Devilman Crybaby, 2018. Now, it was based off the manga by Go Nagai, and it was one of the first heavily publicized animes on Netflix, I would say. If not the very first, like really major.
Yeah, because it was like
pushed.
it was produced by Netflix.
Yeah. In conjunction with Science Saru, and like spawned a huge amount of memes and controversy. But funny enough, 90% of that show's viewers were from outside of Japan.
Yeah.
So this is when like Yuasa really got that huge push into the West. And it's funny to me because like for me, it's not my favorite of his work. I admire how artistic and sort of bold it is. But it's funny because we've mentioned it a few times before on the podcast. It is not a gateway anime.
No.
It is fucking intense. Yeah. It's very sexually overt.
It's
graphic.
sexually violent.
Very
and
Sexually
that's-
violent and overt.
It couldn't have more trigger warnings attached to it. Try.
Yeah. And look, that's obviously coming from the manga.
Which is so funny that that's the one that Netflix was like.
That's my point.
It must have been
Anime.
just like, hey, people love this anime stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, these guys got a good idea.
Yeah.
Let's just do this.
It just strikes
I mean,
me
I
as
kind
such
of
a strange
admire
one.
it. I'm like,
It's super
great.
bold. And I remember at the time, because this is obviously years before we started the podcast, but I remember at the time, a lot of people coming to me being like, hey man, like there's this Devilman Crush, should I check it out? Because I was still,
No.
I was like, I remember sort of actually being like, is that like, oh, I'm seeing it everywhere. And I saw all these reviews in like New York Times and all this stuff. And a lot of people were very critically acclaiming it, but also like, oh, careful, like careful when you watch this. It's pretty fucked
It's
up.
really full on.
And
yeah.
it is even for us, like as big anime nerds and like, even with our blinkers up, I was like,
I think that's just that everything was, it was on Crunchyroll, but not everyone had Crunchyroll, but everyone had a Netflix account in 2018.
Yes, they did.
So it was like, oh, an anime.
yeah.
I love anime, but that's over there behind another paywall. Let's
Yeah.
give this, that's a weird time.
It was a
And
strange
like a
thing.
new, beautiful anime, like the actual style and the animation of it was fantastic. And
Stunning.
the music, there was like the artists who were like rapping in it and that kind of thing. It was really
Yeah.
cool. It was very stylized and very well done. It just is like, I would say it's really harping back to like, Ninja Scroll levels of
Yeah.
hectic. Like it's kind of got back to the old school, like edgelord, like if you want the most fucked up thing ever, here you go. But I remember thinking I enjoyed so many technical aspects of that show.
Loved it. in that
And
respect.
design and some character stuff in there too. But it's a lot and I would never recommend it to anybody.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, damn it, why is this one the one cracking through right now? Because I'm already always trying to defend like, I swear guys, anime is not hectic. And then I'm like, oh, well that one is. But,
Yeah.
but again, like as we're here for this show, there's like different, levels got different level of threshold for that kind of thing. And as long as you're okay with that, it is like objectively a great show.
Yes.
There is already a 80s anime of it as well,
Yes, there
which is a
was.
little less hectic. Like they kind of took a lot of like, I think this is more hectic than the 80s one. Still kind of hectic.
Still hectic, but
Both
yeah,
hectic.
definitely, yeah. I can't really talk about this anymore.
No
Having
holds barred.
flashbacks.
No holds
Yeah, it's a
barred.
lot.
Yeah,
it's pretty full on.
There's that particular episode as
Very
well. I think the
graphic,
second last
sexual.
episode where I was just like,
Yeah.
oh my God.
Yeah, it's hectic.
So heavy. Anyway, that was followed in 2019 by the film Ride Your Wave, which is an original story by Yuasa and actually received Saru's best reviews to date, even to now. So this was coupled with...
Guess we got to put that on the list. Is
Yeah.
it about surfers or
Ride
something?
Your, I didn't actually dive into what it was about because of a lot of notes here. But this was coupled with Super Shiro, an installment of the Crayon Shin-Chan franchise created by Yoshito Yusi, which the series is directed by Yuasa and veteran animator Tomohisa Shioyama. And this culminated in a long association which Yuasa actually had with Crayon Shin-Chan, which I'll talk about in a minute. and because that was one of his first big gigs in the early 90s. Pretty much what broke him through into the industry. But in 2020, and it's a show that I've only recently watched, Science Saru produced Keep Your Hands Off Eizouken. Yes, directed by Yuasa and based off the manga by Sumito Owara. The first anime to appear in both the New Yorker and New York Times best shows list. Yeah, it's fucking great.
Okay.
It's got a great
as well as
opening
receiving huge critical acclaim. And then they follow that with Charlotte's aforementioned Japan Sinks. Not such a good one.
Tokyo Falls.
Tokyo Falls, sorry. Tokyo Stumbles.
The sequel.
That's a better name.
That does happen.
Series actually did attract criticism within Japan for its condemnation of Japanese nationalism, but also received praise for its multiculturalism and inclusivity.
Yeah, look, I haven't actually watched this show, so I watched like clips of it, and I was like, it just seems intense, but I don't know if it's good or bad. So I wash my hands of Japan Sinks. I don't know.
Tokyo Falls.
Falls.
Yes. So as I mentioned, Yuasa stepped down in 2020, citing his desire to take a rest from directing after working the last 7 years straight. But reaffirmed to continue to work with Science Saru in the future. Also, you might have seen Science Saru appear twice in Star Wars Visions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
true.
did 2 episodes. Episode 6 was TOB1, directed by Abel Gongora, who is one of the 5 original staff. Spanish guy. Yeah.
What?
Yep. Episode 9, Akikiri.
You should have kept up with Flash. They really needed
I
someone
should
from
have been there.
Glasgow.
Could have been there.
They needed a
Just a
Scot.
random Scottish guy.
Damn it.
I think this needs to be more sexually graphic over here.
This guy's a genius.
Get him in. But Akikiri was actually directed by Eong Choi herself. So, yeah, really, really cool. But let's now talk about Masaaki Yuasa. Because I think even though he's got not much to do, as far as I could tell, with Dandadan itself, he's just a fascinating character. And because we're talking about his company, we should probably talk about him. And then, of course, we'll loop back around to Dandadan. Don't worry, Dandadan fans. We're coming back around to that.
We'll get there.
But I just thought it was
detailed
interesting.
notes.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting. You know, like it's a really fascinating company because it's one of those companies where you look at and you're like, wow, that's the dream. Like to do what these guys have done is like in an industry which is obviously dominated by huge conglomerates. And of course, we know that the anime industry is in many ways cooked, and especially for creators. But these guys are doing something really unique, really artistic, and clearly with a very close group of friends and colleagues and creators. And that's the dream.
And it's funny because, like, obviously, once you look into them, you go, holy shit, they've done so many amazing things and, like, have a clear, distinct style. And we'll get more into that kind of stuff later. But, like, when we've done episodes where we break down, like, the top anime studios, we've never mentioned Science Saru.
No.
Like, we've mentioned them in passing because of Ping Pong and Devilman Crybaby, that kind of thing. But we've never, like, we've done deep dives on Mappa or, like, you know, Kyo Anime and all this bunch of these other huge ones, Studio Wit. But we haven't brought up this, and it just seems like such an oversight. And so I think it's good for people to know, like, the history of it because it's actually really fascinating. And if a show is popular, it's important to look at, like, the creators behind it in the studio and how it came to be. So I'm looking forward to learning a bit about them because I haven't done the research about this this particular studio before in this way. Thank you, Sam. Take the floor.
It's quite all right. So Yuasa started off as a dogaman. And I mentioned before about the difference between key animation and in-between animation. A doga is in between animation. And funnily enough, he struggled when he first started because...
Horrible job.
Well, yeah, it's a horrible job. And it's
On a leg 5 times,
Yeah.
it's 1 millimeter away from where it was before.
Yep.
Like,
And that's where all the beginners start, right? So when you start in the anime industry, you generally are an in-between animator, a dogaman. But he actually really didn't believe in his own talent because the thing about doing in-between animation, weirdly, the main things you need to be good at are consistency and like specificity. Not Yuasa's major thing when you look at his work. He's all about sort of messy lines and like it looks a little bit, I don't want to say like, I never forget when I was working with
unpolished.
Unpolished. Thank you,
say
Graham.
unpolished,
You saved
yeah.
me from saying shit because
You really need to help us with these artistic words.
yes.
I'll just keep on saying, I'll just be like,
It looks
they used
shit.
No, but
They
it's
use
funny
Flash.
because I'll never forget. I was working with this producer once back when I was a musician, and like I'm not going to say his name or anything. He was a Grammy winner, and he basically said to us one time, he was like, you know, he's Irish, and he was like, you know, guys,
Is
don't.
it Bono?
He had worked with him, but it wasn't Bono.
Oh, okay.
But he was like, you know, don't.
everyone has worked with Bono.
Yeah, true.
He's coming in any minute.
Bono's coming in.
Huge fan of
Jack
Dandadan.
Just
Loves
loves
it.
Dandadan.
Loves it.
Yeah.
Probably does.
Yeah.
But he said to us, he was like, you know, guys, don't be afraid of shit. Don't be afraid of things sounding shit. It's good. shit. There's good shit. You know what I mean? And the example he used was The Strokes. Like a really good example of it. It sounds a bit shit, like the audio quality, but it's fucking amazing. It's great.
Yeah, it's
He was
texture.
Like,
it's
it's
depth,
exactly
it's,
right.
you
He was
know,
like, use shitty microphone. You can get a shitty microphone to sound amazing in the right context, right? And that's what I sort of think when I think of Yuasa's work, because it's like, it's a bit sloppy. It's not like super like detailed like someone like One Punch Man, not one, but Murata.
Murata, yeah.
Murata's like, that's just like perfection. You know?
Every line in its
Every
place.
line's just absolutely glorious. But Yuasa's not like that. As a result, he's more creative in his own way, I think. Well, it's more expressive. They're different. They're just different. They're just
Different styles.
Yes. Anyway, he really struggled with that consistency and precision. But he's, as I mentioned before, his style is much faster and rougher, right? That's what he's sort of famous for. But he was able to showcase this better when he became a Genga Man, which is a key animator. So his first big credit as a key animator was on the TV series Chibi Maruko-chan in 1990. Basically just like about a little girl who gets up to mischief and kind of like a Dennis the Menace type thing. But for a girl.
Dennis the Menace.
Yeah, elements of that. Like,
Right.
and
Sounds wholesome.
Yep, absolutely
hope.
was. Yep, no, correct. But then in 1992, he joined the animation team on Crayon Shin-Chan, as I mentioned before.
Which is like the biggest,
Huge.
like, I think, anime like
kid show,
IP
yeah.
in the world.
It's up there.
I mean,
It's
in
like
Japan in particular.
Huge.
Like when you're over there, it's like we don't see a lot of Shin-Chan here, but it is just literally everywhere in
Yeah.
Japan, and,
No,
it
it's
and has
crazy.
been for decades.
Forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Since it's been going since
Oh,
the 80s. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, as you mentioned, there's TV series, there's TV specials, there's annual film releases. And this became a huge opportunity for Yuasa to actually hone his craft because he got to undertake multiple roles across the whole behemoth that is Shin-Chan. And he started directing episodes of shows. But then after that, he left and started freelancing. But his most notable work over this period was on the OVA series called The Hakkenden, a new saga, based off the epic historical novel Nanso Satomi Hakkenden. His episode, Hamaji's Resurrection, caused quite a stir and has been cited as one of the most important Japanese animated productions of the 90s.
Oh, wow.
I need to find this
Wow,
because,
okay.
yeah. Everyone was like, I think it was the first time Yuasa really got to start becoming Yuasa,
Yeah,
and
okay.
everyone was like, whoa, what's this guy
This guy's
doing?
different.
This is interesting. So he also worked as a freelancer on Ghibli's My Neighbours, the Yamadas.
Oh.
Yeah, yep. He was the writer and animation producer on a short film called Cat Soup. Not about eating cats, thank God. But it looked very experimental when I clicked on it, and I was like, wow, that looks like a really weird kind of short. Another thing, again, after doing this, I really need to go and dive into way more of all this stuff that I'm talking about because
There's a lot.
It just
right?
sounds so interesting. you
Yeah,
know,
and like for us, we've been always anime fans who stick with like TV shows, serials, that kind of like long running series. And like there's just so many in the world of film and short film and things that are like we're totally missing out on. So if you have any suggestions to that, please let us know because
Yeah.
I want to dive into that next because I figure, I don't watch enough animated things. So I need to watch more.
Absolutely. But his big break into directing came with the film Mind Games, based off a little-known manga. However, it was not a commercial success, and he struggled to find much freelance work after it. So he had a real, but like many young auteurs of the time, his work was recognized by, of course, Masao Maruyama. Of course, Madhouse, now MAPPA, then MAPPA, now 2C, I believe, is his new one.
Yeah.
Which of course did Pluto last year, like the man, the guy who gave.
Yeah.
He also gave Satoshi Kon his big break.
He's got an eye.
He did Monster with Urasawa. Also of course did Pluto just recently. Like he's basically, when he eventually, dies or whatever, he will become one of the like immortalized. Like I reckon almost not Tezuka level, but like him and for TV anime.
Yeah.
I reckon he's the most important since Tezuka. I really believe that.
I can get bored with
Whereas
that.
Ghibli, obviously, the film.
Yeah.
No question. We all know that. But he was offered an opportunity to work at Madhouse and given free reign because that's what Maruyama did. They made 3 shows. One was called Kemonozume in 2006, and that's where he first met Choi. The next was a sci-fi drama series called Kaiba in 2008. And then the most famous of these 3, which you might have seen, and I have watched a bit of, was the Tatami Galaxy.
Yes.
In 2010. That actually aired in the USA as well and brought him a lot of international acclaim. So that was he's had a few breaks at this point, but that was the real
Cemented him.
break for Yuasa. Anyway, Choi and Yuasa then crowdfunded a film together called Kick Heart. And it was during the production of this that they started talking about the idea of forming Science Saru. So
All right.
there you go.
Wow.
And then, of course, they did Adventure Time and blah, blah, blah. So there you go.
Man.
Little bit of history there,
That's fascinating.
right?
That is fascinating.
It's crazy shit. Really cool guy. But let's also talk about the director of Dandadan,
Yes.
whose name is Fuga Yamashiro. Now, interestingly about Fuga Yamashiro, as I mentioned before, this is a production company which tends to, what I can see, bring them people in, build them up, and sort of keep them there. So this guy's, his entire Mal credits, every single thing that he has worked on professionally has been in Science Saru.
Okay.
So they brought this guy and he worked on Devilman Crybaby as an assistant production coordinator, Hands Off Eizouken, storyboard episode director for a couple of eps, Haikyuu Monogatari, one they did, Night is Short, Walk On Girl, he was assistant production coordinator, Tatami Time Machine Blues, In Awe, which is another movie they did. So like this guy has clearly just been brought in by Choi and Yuasa and has just been basically molded. And now he's got his chance doing Dandadan and killing it.
Yeah.
It's so cool because also what you might have noticed with the filmography and the work that they've done in the past, not huge, like massive IPs.
No,
right?
I think this is
at all. This is the first. This is their first massive IP.
Yeah.
Like, in fact, by far. So it's quite a surprise.
Devilman Crybaby.
Devilman Crybaby, but again, different. Like, yes,
Yeah,
it was
but that's
pushed,
a bigger IP.
Sorry, that's a
Sure.
bigger IP.
Yeah, it's a classic.
Okay, yes.
But
yes.
it was like a remake of like a
Yeah.
reboot, like a
Yes.
retelling.
Yes.
Reimagining.
Yeah, reimagining. That's the word I'm
Yes.
looking
Yeah,
for.
reimagining in a way.
I mean, yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's done like a huge IP originally. Like, is it? I don't think it's huge. I think
No,
it's
it's
just
a big manga, though.
It's a big manga.
yeah,
It
But I
came
mean,
from
like-
Jump Plus. So it was an online one.
yeah.
So, but it's massive now.
Yeah.
Like-
Oh, yeah. But a lot of it, I think, because of this adaptation.
oh yeah, 100%.
Huge
But
part
I
of
think the manga itself is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And kind of groundbreaking in its own right. So,
And he made it because he had an artistic block, right?
yeah, he was.
The
I think
writer.
he'd had a couple of things. Yokinobu, can't remember his full name, but he'd had a few like bites at the apple. He'd have a few stories published. They would get 2 or 3 chapters in, and then they'd be cancelled because that's the
Oh, how it
nature
works,
of
yeah.
And then he got some advice from what's the author of Chainsaw Man again? Fujimoto, and he was just like, just write. Like, don't be so restrictive on yourself. Like, don't be thinking of like an overarching narrative. Just write and draw what you want to do, and then like piece it together. Just allow yourself to be free, and that's when he came up with this sort of hybrid of a ghost sci-fi slice of life mishmash.
Yeah.
I'd say, for the better word.
Was it that all of these mangakas, including the mangaka of Dandadan, was assistant to
Fujimoto?
Fujimoto?
Yeah,
I think at some point, yeah. There's quite a few
No,
of
that's
them.
the thing. There's like this
Yeah.
legacy where it's like
Anything
there's,
that's weird is from him. So there's the Hell's Paradise.
Yeah.
Mangaka
Yeah.
is one of his students, and there's another one as well, but I can't remember who it is. It's
Yeah.
not Kaiju number 8, but
Might be.
it might be. I'm gonna look this up. It was actually really cool.
yeah, there's
Yeah,
a
it's
few of them
really
in his assistants that have gone, and there's always that joke. It's like, what did he do to his assistants? They all write these weird ass
All
stories.
these crazy,
like,
weird
these
shit.
flower men controlling an island. Like, you're just like, okay.
Well, I think actually a lot of them worked on Fire Punch, actually, as opposed
Probably
to Chainsaw
Fire
Man. I'm
Punch,
pretty
yeah.
sure
Yeah.
these guys all worked on Fire Punch with him, yeah.
Which
But,
is a weird book.
of course it is, yeah.
Such
Do you
a
reckon they'll ever adapt that?
It's not narratively. It's kind of. It feels a bit broy. It's like, he's on fire. Like,
This is so good though because it's Yakunobu Tatsu who is Dandadan. It is Yuji Kaku who is Hell's Paradise,
Yeah.
and then it is Tatsuya Endo who is Spy Family.
Spy.
And I love that it's like
Right,
really
okay.
One of
wholesome.
these things
like,
is not like the
Yeah.
others.
It's so funny to me. It's like, okay, yeah, go off, I guess.
Go off,
Like,
King. Yeah.
But that's 3 incredibly famous mangas out of one assisting team. That's
wild.
You really hope there's not just like a random 4th person who's just like, oh.
Oh.
You're like, don't worry, none of us will ever amount to anything. You're like the biggest, like you're like, oh god.
fucking loser.
Yeah. I'm enjoying that. Yeah, I mean, apparently the Spy Family guy, and I could be just sued for defamation because I do not know if this is correct, but has like stated that he like wrote he didn't really want to write like a family comedy but just ended up doing it because it was successful and was like
Yeah.
sort of off it was kind of like would rather be so really he wants to write Dandadan style things in my head canon here.
He's got
Using
another book out
forced.
right now. I think it's called like The Moon Princess.
Okay, well now he's just
You'll hate it. It's about people from space who live on the moon.
Don't get the Boruto fans angry at me again. I can't.
Yeah.
It's happened too many times.
So there's like a revolt in the Moon Kingdom, and she ends up like having to escape to Earth and trying to regain her like kingdom and save her mother and stuff like that. It's quite good, but it is again leaning into family comedy again. So I feel like
Can't
he's
help
like,
himself.
he's just so good at it.
Yeah,
He's
he's
like
just good at it,
actually
like,
writes like a slapstick wholesome scene. He's like, no, it's meant to be a drama. Like,
Oh, they're all so happy.
oh, there's a cute dog with a bow tie.
He can see the future.
Right.
That is so good.
Right.
But I guess, yeah, so let's talk about Dandadan and like its style, because it is hyper stylized, and you don't see that very much with like sort of shonen-y style mainstreamy hits much anymore. I mean, like
Yeah.
Chainsaw Man, as you've mentioned a few times, and we've seen a lot of people have commented on, probably the most cinematic style of anything, but not pushing the boundaries of animation or like stylism.
Yeah, this
you know?
made me, honestly, I have to say, watching this adaptation made me like, and this is no shade on Mappa, right, who did Chainsaw Man.
Yeah.
I didn't mind the adaptation for Chainsaw Man, but I think looking at Dandadan, I'm like, would have been cool to see what someone like what Science Saru would have done with this. Do you know what I mean like someone with like, because it seems it's a very I don't know, to me as someone who has no expertise in animation whatsoever, which is funny that I'm on a podcast about animation, but you know I like the stories, guys, I like the bits and the fun characters, but no, the animation style in Chainsaw Man I found somewhat off-putting because there's a lot of CG that's kind
It's
of
a lot of CG.
yeah, but there's a lot of CG in
Yeah.
Dandadan too, but it's just the way it's done
but it's more clever, I think.
Yeah.
Than so,
Well, as we mentioned, their style is very specific. It's
Yeah.
pretty much only used for the in-between.
but it's more interesting in Dandadan because Dandadan is a low-key masterpiece. I kind of think every time I watch it, because it's got. So, for instance, everything that's like UFO based is 3D animation, whereas anything that's sort of like Yukai Ghost sort of stuff is hand drawn.
Yeah.
So Turbo Granny's hand drawn, but like the sumo wrestler is a 3D thing.
Yeah.
even yeah.
They're using light in interesting ways. So each character has its own specific sort of lighting. Momo has like this cyan blue type lighting, whereas Okran's red. Anything that kind of falls in UFO sort of side becomes black and white and very washed out. So they're using animation, interesting ways of bringing these characters to life, but they're also using like light in a very interesting way. I think it's low key a masterpiece.
It's anime of the year for me right now, and I know recency bias is a thing, but like I just
It
think
hasn't been that strong a year for anime, to be honest with you. Hasn't been as strong as last year.
no, you're right. You're
It's
right.
still don't come for me, everyone who's been a fan.
been a
of
good
anything
year,
this It's been
yeah.
a good year, and I've enjoyed a lot of different things. But yeah, this is definitely a standout for sure.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to say though, because we were talking about Devilman Crybaby and the the uncomfortable sexual violence aspects. That there still is quite a bit of that in Dandadan. So just wanting
Especially
to
the first episode.
Yeah, the first episode, and there's a lot of like bawdy sexualized humor. It is kind of played off for laughs a lot, but I think the show earns it with the way it kind of treats actual problems and sexual harassment and things like that with the seriousness in itself as well. It's hard to explain the way it pays off storyline wise and the way they're kind of presenting the characters we're supposed to be following. I think it actually gets away with it, which I didn't think was going to be the case at first. So I'm personally, my own personal like threshold of that stuff I'm fine with, but just for other people it's interesting conversation. And there are some fan servicey moments,
Yes,
but
there are.
I think it's completely like that to me. I can take a bit of that because of how incredible the rest of it is. I want to say one thing I think they do really well is the humor.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes.
Yeah, and
funny.
we've talked about this as like comedy in anime. I'm more into the comedies these days. I think I used to be a bit like, no, but now I find comedy in anime like pretty funny. Maybe I just watched enough of it to, but I really I find it genuinely funny and the characters so endearing.
There's a real thing about, especially in the manga, about how he draws his characters. Like they're all characters. They're all constantly posing and pulling faces and
Yeah.
like there's another character who'll be introduced probably in the next couple of episodes where he has to like point at a carton of milk, but he doesn't just go like, hey, he does like this weird pose and stuff. And he's like, for no reason. Like every character is just like well fleshed out and has its own sort of quirks. There's another character that'll come into probably much, much later that has one line that every time I read it, I just like fall on the floor laughing. Like it's so hilarious. The comedy is coming across very well.
It's
Yeah.
so
Which is hard.
it's so rambunctious out of this world comedy as well.
Yeah.
It's like all the most insane things. Half of the time they're just trying to get like like around the ball sack back. You know what I mean? Like that's the whole premise of the show. You're kind of like, it's so ridiculous.
And it turns on a dime as well.
Yeah.
Because there's that episode where he's like, he needs to go to the bathroom, which is hilarious. And then he's in the bathroom. And then she just sort of looks back, and then Turbo Granny's taking up the entire door frame with the big eye, and everyone's getting nosebleeds and stuff. It's just like, it's so quick.
It does. And I guess we'd be remiss not to talk about the episode with Acrobatic Silky. Because
I've been waiting to talk about this for 4 years.
That was, and I'm not being...
This is episode 7 for
episode 7.
Which just aired for us at the time of this
Time
recording.
of recording, yeah.
And just proceeded to ruin all of our lives collectively in the best kind of way. I'm still thinking about it.
One of the best singular pieces of anime I've ever seen. My favorite episode of any piece of media this year.
Oh, wow.
It left me, and I'm including Shogun in that, which I loved, but like I was absolutely floored by it. It was so clever because, as you say, what's interesting about Dandadan to me is that, like, you know, the reason we started this podcast is to be like, hey guys, like, there's a lot of weird stuff in anime. Like, here's how to avoid it, and here's how to, like, you know, keep on track and not push past your limits wherever they may land. But this show, you're right, it does push that boundary in a way because, again, if you like pitch this cold to someone, you're like, it's about a guy, it's about a teenager who gets his balls stolen by a ghost granny. You're like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, I'm not pitching that in an elevator to someone. They're going to put me on a list. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it looks like on, and this is what I guess anime can do at its best, is because again, we're talking about the Japanese sensibility, which, especially when it comes to comedy, and go back and listen to our old comedy episode, but I don't know if it's on YouTube, but we talked a lot about how different the sensibility of comedy is in Japan. Slapstick, massive thing. And I talked a lot about in that episode the very, very crazy reality TV shows and game shows that exist in Japan, which is sort of parts of the irreverence, I suppose. And as I said, slapstick. And again, sometimes sexualized things where you wouldn't expect it from a Western cultural context, right? And we're getting that in Dandadan a little bit, but not enough. And again, not enough for me, as I think you put it really well, Charlie. Like, I'm okay with it. But there are some times where I'm like, oh, I'm skating on the edge here. But then it goes and pulls one of the most emotionally devastating episodes of television I've seen. The brilliance of the direction.
But even the split, because up until that last 10 minutes, it is balls to the walls action, amazing animation, like incredibly choreographed fight scene to like something that just tears your heart out.
Crazy.
And this is like, you know, either Demon Slayer, demon backstory was well done. You know, like,
true.
It's narratively the same thing
is,
what that is,
right.
which isn't that amazing as a very clear anime trope. In the narrative of being like, now we've found out that the monster itself actually is like, you know, that's not something that is groundbreaking. What is groundbreaking is the cinematic style in which this was presented in that 10 minutes. It was a absolute masterpiece in show don't tell. There's no fucking voiceover, I don't think. There's maybe a tiny bit.
It's showman. Yeah,
you just see it, right. And it's like, honestly, the thing it reminded me the most of was the opening of Up.
Yeah.
I was like that montage with like, I was just kind of like, I mean, not this different tone happening. Different tonality, but you know, like in terms of like how we see this like montage and we get to know these characters who we don't know or like we'll never know really. Like there's like a small amount and you just care so much. It's beautifully animated. It was like a work of art. And it's interesting because I think that hearing that Science Saru do a lot of films.
Yeah.
It's like a cinematic bit. It felt like a movie. It didn't feel like a TV show. And I think that they got to really like flex that ability to make a good narrative piece that belonged in a cinema. Like it was a really cinematic moment and it felt standalone in a nice way. Like, because as I was saying, narratively, that's not a new thing that people do.
Classic,
like it's very, it's a classic thing. But this was, it absolutely blew my mind. And I was like sobbing hysterically. It's so fucking sad and beautiful. And I mean, it's well animated, right? Like I can't say like her dancing and
starlight,
is gorgeous.
Even like the way the daughter's drawn as well, the big eyes, the look, the look of love, like to her mum. You're like, oh my god.
I knew I was screwed the minute that door opened.
I
was like,
no! It's gonna break my heart.
Oh man.
And just brutal as well, like when the girl's taken as well, just brutal. And then that's like it sort of opens with the first person frantically running through the streets.
Like, what's that?
And then when you actually figure out what it is, you're like, oh my god, she's just frantically running in directions to look for a door.
The sound design too, like almost the kind of primal,
the breathing,
almost feral kind of like hysteria.
Which
which you would 100%
Yeah.
would be the reaction that you would have in a moment like that. It was just outstanding.
Like her happiness and content, even though she obviously has to do a lot of work and jobs that she doesn't like enjoy doing, but like it's all worth it for the happiness and the moment she spends with her daughter.
I wish I could have bought you more pretty dresses. I was
Oh
like,
my
"Ugh."
god, it was
Oh, man, soul
absolutely
destroying, dude.
like I was
And the way that was
furious.
handled with the actual core cast as well, when Okuran's like, should I take her out? And then Momo's like hysterical, be like, no. And then of course we've only really introduced this newish character at this point, but obviously a huge emotional moment for her when she goes and embraces her.
so
It's such a stunning. It was just so incredible, right?
And then cut. Sorry, I just spat. And then cut to the ending.
Fucking end tune.
With
Like,
fucking turbo granny and cat mode. Honestly, I was like, maybe you could have had a piano version of that.
Beautiful song, yes. So,
I like a turbo granny was just pretty heartless the whole way
chilly,
through.
on the phone, just
having
like
none of it.
Yeah,
What
but
are
it was
you
in
gonna do?
character, which is good.
But again, you're right. It was because it is such a trope. You weren't expecting that from Dandadan, right? You weren't expecting them to try and to pull that on you. Because again, really the major thing that most television creators and creators of art want to do is subvert your expectations, surprise you, shock you, right? And that's what it did. And they keep doing it. And from what I understand from just reading Reddit threads and whatnot, is that we're going to get our expectations subverted a lot more. I'm sure you can probably speak to that without spoiling anything. Like,
I don't know how you do it without spoiling things.
you don't need to, but like,
spoil
it will happen, right?
It's going to push and pull you in a lot of different directions. Like as I said, it's such like the way he was writing it was just not like free form or anything like that, but he was definitely unchained to write a story like this in the middle of a action set piece of a mother's child being stolen from her. Like it's going to be so much bigger than you imagine, but it's also going to be very small and personal at the same time. Like it's good.
What we have here is obviously an amazing piece of art made by an extraordinary mangaka who was obviously tutored by one of the modern greats in Fujimoto, and the studio, the perfect studio, because
It really is like
let's be real here. Sometimes, and again, when you get deep into the anime reads and you're like seeing shows coming up in the future and you're in Reddit threads and you're like, oh no, this company has that. Like, for example, when JC Staff took over from Madhouse with One Punch Man, a lot of reticence in the community. Everyone was like, oh, these guys aren't great. They're famous for rushing things. And what happened? Wasn't even close to the same, right? Now, of course, the One Punch Man Season 1 Madhouse team was like a dream team. Absolutely out of control. Shingo Natsume, helming that. Shingo Natsume was the director of Tatami Time Machine Blues, which he took over from Yuasa when they did it at Science Saru later on. So, but obviously Science Saru didn't do Tatami
Galaxy.
Galaxy. That was at Madhouse.
Yeah.
But Shingo Natsume, again, nice crossover here with another sort of modern visionary
Right.
working with these guys. So we've just got an example of like, oh my God. And like I said, this is the first time I've really seen Science Saru do something like this. Because even like Devilman Crybaby is more on brand because it's weird and like quite edgy and pushy and like in the direction.
I feel like Hands Off Eizouken, is that
Yeah.
how you say it? Is kind of similar vibe to this with the humor and the school life and the
but
they-
much more of an artistic endeavor and more niche.
Yeah.
This has massive
Yeah, this is an action
widespread
series.
appeal,
But
like-
Hands Up, I mean, like in terms of their style, like I feel like I can see the combination of Devilman Crybaby and Hands Off in together for this.
Massive, yeah,
Like
definitely,
it's
yeah.
like they're doing
Yeah,
all
yeah.
of their like, I don't know.
It's just fascinating to
And
see.
Tokyo Falls as well.
And,
It's a
and their
real-
famous show, Tokyo Falls.
Famous show. Yeah, I mean, they're working with such an incredible team on Dandadan as well as the studio. So obviously, like, there are so many different roles within a studio of different things, and we kind of say that we brushed on it. So there's obviously a director, but this is an art director who is a very prolific art director from anime productions, and that is Higashi Junichi, who, just did a little old show as art director called Cowboy Bebop. So, we're in good hands here.
Wow.
You got the fucking art director of Cowboy Bebop and Escaflowne. Don't know how to pronounce that. It's definitely not Escaflowne, but Escaflowne.
Learned that the hard way.
There you go. Yes, and a bunch of other amazing shows. But yeah, I think obviously they just got assembled a hell of a team for this one.
Absolutely. The director is like a film director, overarching, looking at it all. The art director is sort of in charge of how it all looks, like a DOP in many ways. But the animation director, Greg, you want to talk about him and what that role is? It sounds pretty self-explanatory, but who it is?
Shuto Inomoto. I mean, he's the guy who kind of gets it all together, really.
Yes, he checks all the key animation.
Yeah. Every sort of step in the way will be checked off between the Doberman and the other one, Sam.
Gengaman.
I'm just scrolling through his works. There's too many to list. Too many.
What are some of his big boys?
Probably something in the West we'll probably know more than anything else is the Star Wars Visions. You did episode 8, key animation sort of stuff. Just think of every anime that's been made in the last 10 years. He's probably had a hand in it.
Wow.
I mean, Haiku, obviously, was.
He's
got a lot. He's got a lot.
Yeah.
It won't load on the page that somebody he's got. But yeah, the guy who's the checks and balances of the actual, nuts and bolts, we'll say.
Yeah, it's just a pretty extraordinary team, really. And as I mentioned, Fukuyama Shiro has only worked at Science Saru, as far as I could tell. Someone, if you know some other places he's worked, please let me know. But from what I could tell in his mal, he'd pretty much obviously been brought in to Science Saru and has now worked his way to the position of now full director of a series. Pretty cool. But no, it's just really interesting. And I think we wanted to talk about it because we're all obsessed with Dandadan and we're all absolutely loving how good it is. But I just wanted to talk about that because I think we could it's been a long time since we've done our deep dive into the animation studios. In fact, we're probably due
There's probably been a bunch of new ones and people,
there's tons. And
get
we
back
could go.
together.
That was also before we got on YouTube as well. It's probably something we could probably revisit and reassess because
it's fascinating to see.
It's fascinating,
who
man, and
does what.
Then of course you get into the Sakuga community, which is another whole world. Which again, I'm not even going to touch here because that's about which key animator, which
could be a good
animation
interesting
director.
topic episode though.
We should
bring your best Sakugas in.
Well, there's a whole world. Sakugan? The guys who do it. There's a word for it. Again, not our field. But yeah, basically it's a whole world of those who we interviewed a guy called Forgotten Relics, which you can check out on our YouTube channel, who does this for Dragon Ball Z, and knows exactly which sequence was animated by which person when, and can be oh, you can see here because his style is like this, and then it changes here. Whole world out there. But I just find all of this stuff fascinating. And Dandadan is killing it. If you haven't watched Dandadan, if we haven't convinced you from this episode, my lord, I know we've done it wrong because you've got to check it out. Even if you are someone who is on the fence about it or did that first episode and didn't want to and thought it was too much, fair enough. I'm not judging. I can totally understand how that would be the case. But please watch it. It's incredible.
The best thing about Dandadan is trying to give it a genre because you're it's like a action comedy romance. And then I'm drama, paranormal, it's genre defying, and we love that.
We love that here.
We love a genre defying.
I like my genres defined.
I like it.
Defied even.
That's a great show. I always go on to YouTube and look up Dandadan references because the artist is known for taking poses out of other shows and putting them in. So there's the thing with the face mask that the granny wears is Gojo when she pulls it up, doing the head tilt back.
Oh my god, I know what I'm doing tonight.
Yeah. There's a lot of nods and hints throughout the anime.
Well, even in the opening sequence when Momo's dancing, that's from a Rihanna.
Yeah, that's so sick.
And
that
also,
dance move. I tried to recreate it. It wasn't quite successful.
Okay, I could have told you that before you even started, but could have saved you a lot of time.
Saved you a night.
Saved you another. Don't try that. But then behind them as well, there's two other characters. They're doing the Prince of Bel-Air dance.
Oh, are they?
Check it out. Watch behind. They're doing the Prince.
The Carlton.
The Carlton. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, keep an eye out for the references. There's lots of hidden Easter eggs throughout the shows.
Yeah, really cool. But anyway, guys, thank you so much. Hope you all learned something about Science Saru, Masaaki Yuasa, and Dandadan. Now, of course, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, where hopefully you are watching us right now. Please like and subscribe. It does make a big difference. If you are listening through the podcast platforms, please head to Spotify. Click that 5-star little ting. Otherwise, if you're on Apple, write us a review. Really does make a massive difference. And if you really like what we're doing, you can find us on Patreon, where we give you extra episodes. Haven't quite decided what we're going to do for this one yet. We'll figure it out.
We're going to all learn how to do that dance.
We're all going to try.
That's what we're doing on Patreon.
Yeah. Head on over to Patreon. It's a different vibe over there.
We'll lose all of our subscribers immediately.
Instantly
Everyone's like,
gone. No, obviously, head over there. You can join for as little as $1.50. Early release episodes, behind the scenes, and special episodes just for y'all. Thank you so much. We can't do what we do without our patrons. We really love our community over there. So, Graham, Charlie, thank you so much, guys. We'll catch you all next time. Have a good one. Watch Dandadan.